Welcome everyone to your Getting Started Guide to the KPG Gaming Career Experience. In this video, we're going to go step by step with exactly what you need to do to get started in your career experience. And by the end of today's video, you will have a fully functioning career up and running. Now, if you haven't had a chance to watch the introduction and overview video for the career experience, I highly recommend doing so as I go through all of the different areas of the spreadsheet and give you a broad overview of what it's all about. So for today's video, we're going to spend a lot of time over here on the tips and starting guide area, and then we're going to move into the series screen and spend some time on the home screen as well. We're going to try to fit it all together and get your career started. But to begin with, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the notes. Just as we talked about in the introductory video, I had 3 simple goals when putting together this career experience. Number 1 was simplicity. I wanted it to be very easy to follow. Once you get going, you should have no trouble continuing on into multiple series, expanding your teams, and so forth. The second goal was customization. I wanted basically everything that you see, all of the numerical values, all the driver's names, sponsor names. I wanted everything to be easily adjusted to your own liking. And then number 3, I wanted to provide as many options for play styles as I possibly could. Nothing in here is required. You are free to use all of the different areas in any way you see fit, or simply ignore them altogether. It is completely up to you. Very few things are required, and those are simply some of the necessities that we really can't run a career mode without. You'll notice that as you go throughout the career and look at the different values for the incoming expenses for the different series, that some of them seem realistic, others do not. The reason for that is ultimately I wanted a sense of progression throughout the career mode. This was initially designed so that you start out on a very basic local level, lower tier series, and then work your way up through the career ladder. And let's face it, racing in general is not a money-making venture. Most teams do not make money, or if they do, it's just a small amount. It is certainly not a get-rich-quick business. So I needed to make some adjustments to the numbers so that we could have enough profit potential to include that progression that I wanted. Moving on to number 2, you're going to be doing some copy and pasting in different areas for drivers, sponsorship deals, that type of thing. Get in the habit of doing a copy and then a paste special value. And we'll see that here in just a moment. But rather than just a simple copy paste, you want to paste the value, because in some of these instances we'll be copying from a cell that uses a formula, and we don't want to copy the formula, we want the value from the cell. So get used to copying and pasting the value. And then, as I talked about with number 1, pretty much everything is available for you to edit, adjust, or add to in the case of adding more series, adding more sponsors, drivers, and so on. So feel free to have fun with this and play around. There is a lot of randomness should you decide to use it. Randomness with sponsors, randomness with driver finishes. All of that is available to you if you want to use it. Sometimes the values are completely random. Others are probability based, such as with the driver finishes. So keep that in mind. It's not everything totally random. There's a lot going on behind the scenes for a lot of what will seem to be random. And number 5 is one of the most important tips I can give you when getting started here. There are a lot of notes placed in different areas of the sheet. We talked about this briefly in the introduction video as well, but you'll see these red arrows in the top right-hand corner of some of the cells, which will bring up notes. Please read through these, as these will answer a lot of questions and give you a lot of background information about the particular area of the spreadsheet, as well as offering you options on how to use this particular area. So these are very valuable as you move throughout the spreadsheet. The sixth item is that this career mode can be played as a player driver, a team owner, or some combination of both. There are no barriers to how you play the career mode. It is completely up to you. And in that same vein, number 7 talks about how the entire career progression can be experienced within the spreadsheet without needing a driving game or a driving sim. Number 8 is that at some point you're probably going to have some errors crop up in certain areas of the sheet. I'm going to try to cover as much of that as I can in today's video about where those areas likely are going to be if you're going to see errors. But just remember that there are a few different things you can do about that. Number 1 is look for those notes that I talked about, those arrows that maybe can help you out with something that you might be missing. Or there's always the Knee Gaming Discord available to you. There'll be a special area there where you can drop in, ask a question, and get some help if you need it. And then the final thing is the most important. Have fun with this. This is all about having fun, a career mode progression. Play it however you want, but most importantly, have fun with it. And that might take you a little time to figure out which direction you want to go, but I can assure you it is more than worth it. So now that we've run through a few of the tips and tricks that I recommend at the beginning, now let's hop in to starting our career. So at this point, let's say you've watched the introductory video and you're excited about getting started in your own career. And now you've listened to the tips, we're ready to go. I want to start my career right now. Step 1 is to purchase our first marketing level. The reason why this is number 1 is because I cannot overstate the importance of marketing level. And you're going to see this as we continue throughout today's video. But marketing level, we start out, we have no marketing level. We haven't started our team yet. So the first thing we need to do is reach level 1. So we simply put purchase into column G, and you can see the very first one is free of charge. So now we have reached level 1. Okay. And that's the same process that you're going to take as you progress throughout the marketing levels. You're simply going to put purchase in column G from the drop down, and you're good to go. As you can see, it gets more and more expensive the higher our marketing level becomes. Now, what marketing level do we need in order to get started? Well, we're going to determine that here in just a few moments. But for now, we're at marketing level 1, and that is step 1. Step 2 is explore the different series that you have available by default through the series financial screen. Here you see in column P, I have a total of 16 series that are popular within the US, both from a local track level all the way up through national touring series at the very top. So we need to decide where we want to start. Now, originally I designed this career progression to start at some of the lower series and simply work your way up through, but you're more than welcome to start at the very top if you so desire. Where you start will determine how much money you need, what marketing level you need, and so forth. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to look at one of the lower tier series. I'm going to choose the Dirt Super Late Models. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and go Dirt Midget. And the reason I'm going to choose the Dirt Midget is because I'm going to show you the process of hiring a driver rather than being the driver myself, just so that we can show some additional parts to the career progression. So we're going to choose the Dirt Midgets. Now, what I need to know first is what number is that? The series number can be found in column N, and for the Dirt Midgets, that's number 13. So if we come over to the Series 1 tab, we come over to A1, and I'm simply going to type 13, hit enter, and it displays the series name. So the first thing you want to do after entering your number into A1 is you want to verify that, yes, this is the series I intend to run. The reason being is the number you enter here will determine all of the financial information that pre-fills as we consider our career in the Dirt Midgets. So make sure that you have this number right. If you forget to put something in here, you're going to generate a lot of errors as you start trying to input driver finishes and races and so forth. So make sure you get that one to start things off. Next up, you see the marketing level. And the most important number here is going to be the series marketing level. And then next to that, you have the team marketing level. The team marketing level comes directly from the home screen right here. The higher the number here, the higher the number that shows up on the series screen. Now remember, all of these series 1 through 10 work exactly the same. So we're only going to need to use series number 1 today. You also notice on the home screen that now that we have chosen our first series, the series title pops in here, and then as we make some additional choices, our profit and loss is going to be adjusted as well. So here on series 1, we have our marketing level of 1, which translates into a series level of 1. But the real question is, how do we get this as high as we can, and how high can it go? Well, the maximum marketing level for a particular series is found on the series financials. In our case, we're looking at the Dirt Midget. Marketing level is on column Q. So Dirt Midget would be 6. So the highest marketing level that we can use in this particular series is 6, which means that here at the very beginning, there is no reason for us to go beyond marketing level 6. So there's no reason for us to try to purchase 7, 8, 9, and so forth right now. It would simply be wasted money. We don't need it right now. 6 is the highest number that we would think about. Now, do we need to get all the way to 6? Well, my general recommendation is as soon as you can, you want to reach that maximum marketing level for a particular series. So in this case, 6. Doesn't mean you have to start there, but it's recommended because that's how you're going to maximize your profitability. Now, if we come back to our starting guide, because I don't want to get too far ahead, we're now on number 3. We have chosen our first series and entered that number into box A1. We've done that. We now have our starting series. So let's come back to the starting guide with getting familiar with the series 1 sheet. All right, so you've got your 3 different areas, which you've seen from the introductory video that I did for the career experience. But let's go back very briefly and look at some of the items that we're going to need for today. And I'm going to hop around a little bit in this starting guide because, well, number 5 plays right into what we're about to do, as well as number 6. So we're going to sort of blend these together for our purposes. And so we have our initial area. This is where we're going to enter our results. You can see we have room to put our season. In this case, we'll start with 2022, our first race number. So you'll have race number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And then one of the required fields. You notice that it's got a red arrow in the top right-hand corner, and it says, in all caps, required field. If you forget for each event to fill in this area, then it will give you an error message. So keep in mind, you need to tell the spreadsheet, what type of event is this? What track are we at? What qualifying position did you have? And then what race finish did you have? Now, at the very beginning, we're only going to have 1 team. But as you expand into a total of 4 teams, if you decide to expand, then you'll use these. Otherwise, simply leave them blank. All right, so we'll come back to this here in just a moment as we get started in our first races. But for now, let's move over to the race purse, which is going to be determined by the type of event as well as your finish. So this will automatically pre-fill. Next up, we're going to need to sign a sponsor. Now, how do we do that? Well, this sponsorship area, which encompasses enough room for a total of 4 sponsors for all 4 of your teams, if you have that many. Again, if you're not using more than 1 team, simply leave them blank. But it's designed so that you will copy paste your sponsor into the very top row, and then from there on down, it will automatically fill these in as you enter race results until that particular sponsorship expires. The default sponsor length, if you choose not to copy and paste the one that is provided for you, will be 10 races. They can be anywhere from 1 race up to a total of 20. So that's what we're going to see here in just a moment. So we need to decide our marketing level. How much money do we need? And we'll come back to that in just a few moments. But once we get through with the income section in blue, we'll have our total income at the very end to total up both our race purse as well as our sponsorships. Then we come into the expenses. Now again, a lot of this is going to be pre-filled for you based on the information you put in the race finishes section, but we're going to have our total team expenses, marketing expenses based on our marketing level, and then our driver salary, which for our purposes, we're going to hire a driver, so we're going to have driver salary. And this is one of the things that we will need to fill in manually for each event, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is. Then we get into chassis damage. And as we start to enter race results, we'll talk about maybe some ways that you can use this to increase the difficulty or reduce the difficulty of your career experience. And then finally, just like we saw in the income area, we have our total income. Now we have our total expenses. And then ultimately, we're going to have a profit or a loss for this particular event. Obviously, we want to make as much money per event as possible because that's going to give us more money for future expansion. And then what we need to do right now is decide how we want to get started. So let's look at the purchases and upgrades here in the team management section. All right, so we're going to start off with a single team. So here in the facility section, we're going to start off right here with a starter garage, and this assumes this is just a garage that you've built on your personal property in the backyard in order to start your racing career. So that's kind of how this came to be. So I'm simply going to, in the drop down, choose purchase. That brings in $15,000, which is the amount from column BC. And then you can see all of the financial data starts to roll its way up, and ultimately it rolls its way over to the series profit or loss, which makes its way onto the home screen. So everything flows together. All right, so as we move back over, all right, so we know we're going to do that. Now, for now, don't worry the fact that we don't have any money to spend. We're going to take care of that in just a few moments. So we're going to start out with a single team, but of course, you can always start out with a second team, a third team, and so on. But the progression is designed as such. We start off with a starter garage built in our own backyard, on our own personal property. Then when we decide that we want to expand, we need to go purchase some land for future expansion. That's what level 2 facility is about. But it doesn't actually get you any buildings. We now have the land that we can expand, but that's it. Level 3 is where we take that land and actually build a 2-team garage on it. And it has a certain amount of money attached to that. And then we can expand. Now that we have plenty of land, we can expand to a 3-team operation and then finally a 4-team operation whenever we're ready, if we desire. But for right now, single team. Then we need to deal with team 1. How many chassis do we need? Well, because of the series that we're in the dirt midget, so I'm going to say we can run all of the races with a single chassis. All right, so number of chassis, we're going to leave this at 1, and I'm going to do the same thing we did up in the facility area. I'm going to choose purchase. That's going to drop in our financial information that flows its way up. However, if we were in a series such as one of the NASCAR series, where they run at different types of tracks, you might need a chassis for road courses, a chassis for short tracks, a chassis for super speedways like Daytona or Talladega, and then a downforce chassis for the intermediate tracks. That's a total of 4 chassis right there. We would simply change this to a 4, hit enter, and now you can see the amounts update as necessary. But for us, we only need 1. Okay, so we're going to change that back to a 1. So we have the chassis that we need. Now, so you might be thinking, okay, what happens if we wreck that chassis? Maybe we total the chassis, or maybe we get into a bad wreck that needs the front or the rear clip to be replaced. That's where you get into the chassis damage. Okay, and I've got some description here. 25% damage on a chassis. Now, keep in mind, first and foremost, that your race expenses that can be seen right here under total team expenses. And more specifically, you can see it in column S here on series financials. This is the number that you're going to pay just to enter the event. No matter if you win or finish last, just to enter the event. So in the case of the Dirt Midget, it's going to be just under $1,700. And that is intended to cover your basic wear and tear and your upkeep. So if you have some minor fender damage, things like that, as they apply, then that's covered under your basic damage. But let's say you get into a little bit more serious accident. If you have 25% damage, which would be a pretty rough accident, but not enough to need a complete replacement of the front or the rear clip, for example, then maybe you will have 25% damage. And here's how much that would cost you. Maybe you get in an accident that's severe enough that maybe you hit head first into the wall or very hard hit on the right front that does a lot of suspension damage. Maybe you need to replace the front clip. That would be at a 50% damage. And then you can see 75%, same thing, up to 100%, which would be a total loss of that chassis, and you're going to need to replace a chassis at that point. So that's sort of how this all flows. Now, you'll notice that the damage cost here is different than our cost over here for replacing a chassis, and that's because there are some other costs involved here, which you can see on the series financials. If I scroll over a little bit, you can see that there's some additional equipment and cost for things such as you're going to need a truck, or maybe, depending on the series, maybe a semi to tow a trailer that you're going to need to purchase. So all of that comes into play. So there's additional cost that is going to show up here under your purchases and upgrades that won't necessarily show up under the chassis damage itself. So that's why there is a difference. So that's how, but this is an area that can really change how your career progression goes. If you are playing this as a player driver, where you're going to be driving in your sim of choice, then maybe it makes you change your mind in your driving style. Maybe you're not going to be quite as aggressive if you know that accruing damage is going to cost you a lot of money. Or maybe the driver finish generation can play into that. And again, we'll see that a little bit later on, and some suggestions on how you can go about using these areas. But again, remember, anywhere you see a red area, I've put information and tips and tried to answer some questions along the way. So I cannot overemphasize, please take a look at all of these notes that I've put into the spreadsheet. All right, so now at this point, we've decided our facility. We simply built a garage on the back, or we're using our existing garage on our personal property. We've also purchased a single chassis. So we're ready to go if we're driving the car, but we're not going to drive the car. Now we'll come back to the relative performance upgrades here in just a moment. But I've decided that we're not going to drive our own car. We're going to hire a driver. So how do we do that? Well, this is the area where we'll hire our driver. And in blue, there's room for 4 drivers for a maximum of a 4-car team. So we need to figure out who's going to be our driver. And there's 2 ways of doing that. Number 1, we can simply go over to the drivers for hire. We can scroll down until we find our series, which is the Dirt Midgets. So here are all of those drivers that are available, unless you decided that you wanted to go to the bottom and add additional drivers to use. Hey, add yourself down there if you so choose. And we can pick out which driver we want. Or we can come back to the home screen and we can choose a driver that is available for us here. Now in this case, because of the series we're in, I don't see any midget drivers that are available. We've got 410 Sprint. You'll also see some super lates in here as well, but I don't see any midgets. So let's just go over to the drivers for hire tab and let's pick out one for ourselves. Now, in this case, I'm going to pick Jade Avedizian because she is a level 30 driver. That is actually the bottom level, the lowest level in here. As you can see in column K, it goes 1 through 30. And the reason I'm going to do that, and by the way, the level, as I mentioned in the introductory video, the level 30 does not mean she is the worst driver imaginable. It's all relative to the series and based on, I tried to go roughly based on their experience so far and their average finishes, but that certainly doesn't mean that they're all accurate. I needed to make some changes so that we would have drivers of all levels in each series. So that's ultimately why I did what I did. So in this case, I'm going to come back down. I'm going to find Jade Avedizian. She is a dirt midget driver, and I'm going to simply copy paste. We're going to come back to series 1. And now remember, when we paste, we don't want to just simply do a regular paste. I want to paste values. So V is what we're looking for. There we go. And you can see it pre-fills her name and information in a few different areas. First of all, her salary pre-fills. She is team driver number 1. When you're ready to hire driver number 2, you'll simply put a 2 here, and same as you go on through 3 and 4. So let's go ahead and get rid of 2 since we only have a 1-car team right now. So she's driver number 1. Her driver level originally, when we first hired her, meaning that when we copied her information from the driver screen, was 30, and right now she's still at a level 30. But if we scroll over a little bit, we get into the driver training. All right, so she is a level 30, but here we have the information necessary if we so desire to improve her level. So if we come back over to the drivers for hire, the question is how high of a level would we want to give her? Well, the highest level driver for the dirt midgets is a level 26. So there are always 5 levels per series. 26 through 30 is for the dirt midgets. So the highest level we would want to get her to is 26. And we can do that right here on the series screen. And the way we would do that is we would simply put purchase here. That drops in the new driver level, and that pre-fills in the necessary areas, as well as the cost, which is going to filter into our profit and loss. So for right now, I'm going to remove that. We're going to leave her as a level 30. And for the record, I don't feel like Jade Avedizian is a level 30 driver. I actually think she's a very good driver, showing a lot of promise. In fact, I was just watching her last night on Flow Racing. But again, for the purposes of career progression, I have a varied mix of drivers at different levels. But that's how you could progress a driver. So once you got to level 26, maybe you want to take her all the way to level 1. Obviously, you're not going to do that here in this series because level 26 is our highest level in this series. But if you wanted to move her to one of your other series higher up, you can move her up the ladder just as you would yourself as a driver. And it is a lot of fun to do. And I'm really happy that I was able to incorporate this into the career experience. All right, so we've now hired our driver. We know what level they are, but how is that going to correspond into our driver finishes? Because I'm not going to be running any races in any particular racing game or racing sim to get these finishes. I'm going to use the generated finishes. Well, she's a level 30 driver, so we come back over and we simply find level 30 under the driver finish generation. And here it is. So we're going to use this number, but there's another number here. Relative finish. So why the two numbers? They're the same right now, but will they always be the same? We're about to answer those questions. So now that we have figured out where we're going to get the finishes for Jade from on the spreadsheet, now let's see these two numbers. So the first number is the generated finish. This is the probability-based finish generated based on her level. So you can see that we have all 5 levels in here. In general, the highest level, in this case level 26, would have the best overall finishes on an average basis. However, just like we see right now, level 27 had a better finish than level 26. In fact, level 28 almost had a better finish. Why is that? It's because we're dealing with an average finish. And I wanted to leave plenty of room for some bad races. And that's because the bad races give us an opportunity to think out of the box a little bit and think about damage. So for example, let's go ahead and look at some damage, and we'll come back to that in just a moment whenever we finally get to entering race results and the money and the profit and all that. But let's say that we have a level 26 driver, and let's say that it generated a result of, say, 26. That is not the finish that we would expect from a top-level driver in a series. So one way to look at that is to say, oh, they must have had damage. They lost a motor. They got involved in a wreck, whatever the case may be. So let's say that, oof, that means we need to put some chassis damage in here. How much damage should we use? Well, you can use your own number. If you like, you can come up with your own percentage, 25% to 100%, or you can use the random generation to do that for you. In this case, we say, okay, this is a finish well outside the norm for this driver of this level. So we have chassis damage. What damage level should we use? Well, I come over to team 1 and it shows 4, which is 100%. So we would simply put 100% over here under chassis damage, and that's going to generate an amount which we know is $8,200, and that is going to put a severe dent in our profitability. So that's one of my favorite ways to use the chassis damage, and a combination with the chassis damage and the randomized probability-based driver finishes. It is a ton of fun and really mixes things up so that you're never quite sure what you're going to get. Now, this will update constantly. Every time we update the spreadsheet, these numbers will update because they're randomized. Now, they do have probability based in there, and the probability basis is that most of the time it's going to be a 1. A huge percentage it'll be a 1. Then if it's not a 1, it's most likely going to be a 2, but there's also a tiny possibility it's a 4, and it just so happened right now it is a 4. So again, just some things to think about, and all of this is in the notes for you to take a look at. So now we've discussed generated finish and where that comes from. What about relative finish? Well, the relative finish is related to our relative performance upgrade section. So you're going to see the section here. You see relative performance loss right next to it, right here. And then at the very top, you see performance gain, performance loss, and then your relative performance overall right here. So what I like to do is I like to start my team off at the very bottom. Now, in this case, we already have the lowest tier driver for this particular series, so we don't necessarily have to do this, but we know we have the lowest tier driver. But what about our team? What's the performance of our team? So in other words, if we put the highest tier driver in the car, how well would they do? Well, right now, hey, they would do the very best that they can because our team is no performance loss. We are a top level team. Our relative performance is 0, which means we're on an even keel with every other team out there, or at least the top level teams. So, okay, what can we do about that? Well, if you want to start, as I prefer to do, as a bottom tier team, you're just getting started, your equipment is not great, you're trying to work through some things, get into a rhythm, maybe get some better components and so forth. So we're starting out at the bottom. So what I like to do is come in and say, okay, since we're starting in year 2022, I'm going to put team starting value here for description. This is completely up to you. These are not required fields, but it will help you as you continue on in your career to give a description of why is this value in here? What was that about? All right. And so instead of a performance gain, we're going to go with a performance loss. And I'm going to put 25. And 25 represents 25 positions, meaning that if we had a top tier driver who would have otherwise won the race, because of our equipment not being as good, he now finishes 25th, which in dirt racing would be at the very back of the A main. So we're starting with a 25. Now, if we go back up to the top, that's actually the lowest number that's allowed for relative performance. You can see it here in the formula. If you know anything about formulas in Excel, that is the absolute minimum amount that can be here, minus 25. So, okay, so how do we increase that over time? Well, you're going to need to spend some money. The way we do that, now we're not necessarily going to keep this right now because we want to start off as the bottom tier team. But what we could do is, once again, I'm going to leave the year out, but I'm going to say team investment. Okay, so we put some money into our team. So I'm simply going to put purchase. In this one, I'll put loss, although it's not really going to matter for the losses. But I'm going to put purchase, just like we did in the other areas. And how much are we going to purchase? Well, the amount that it's going to cost per adjustment, performance adjustment, is $3,750. Meaning that if I say, well, I'm going to purchase 5. All right, that 5, subtract that from the 25, we're now at a negative 20 performance. We're now 20 spots worse than we could have possibly been with top line equipment, but it cost us $18,750 to get there. So as you progress, if you want to start in this type of a fashion with a lower tier team, then as you progress, as you run races and make money and have profitability, then you can spend some of that money in performance gain to get your way back up to the 0 level, which would mean your equipment is now on par with the best in the division. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. Okay, since we are going to start out at a minus 25. So how does all of this flow into the driver finishes? Well, we've got a minus 25 here. If we scroll back over to driver finish generation, now we notice that what was a 25th place finish for our level 30 driver is now a 50th place. Now, in this case, it goes beyond the 40 positions that I have available. If we come back over to the race purses, I have a total of 40 finishing positions. So in this case, we would simply choose 40. I didn't limit this because you might have reason that you want to use some other numbers, so I let it go. But just keep in mind, the race purse goes up to 40th position, and that's as high as it go. So in this case, it would be a 40th place position. So we finished dead last and got the minimum amount of money. So it is definitely in your best interest to try to stay as close to 0 as you can on this relative performance. It just gives another level of progression. All right, so now that we've taken care of all of this, we've hired a driver, we've bought our equipment, our garage, all of this stuff, you can see, hey, we need some money for this. We've spent over $68,000 just to get to this point, and we haven't run a single race. You can see how the money flows here and then into the home screen. So now we're in the hole, $68,250. So how do we cover that? Well, that's where our investors come in. You can sign one of these investors or all of them. Feel free to start out with however much money you desire. And of course, how much money you'll need will be based on the series. Here, we need about $68,000 just to run our first race. So we could choose the $50,000. As soon as I put accept here, it generates the $50,000, but we're still at a loss. So let's get rid of that one. Let's actually go for the $100,000. That will cover our beginning expenses, all of our initial purchases for equipment, hiring our driver, all of it. And it gives us about 31 grand left over. Excellent. That is not a ton of money, but at least covers us for the time being. Now, is that going to be enough? Well, we still need to set our initial marketing level. All right, so what we're going to do for that, and there are a few different ways of doing this, but an easy way until you get the hang of this and how it's all generated is to simply come in and put in a race finish. and see how much money you're losing. And then we'll figure out which marketing level we need to start at. Again, this is just something that you can do at the very beginning. Very quickly, you're going to pick up on the flow and how much money you're making, losing, how much profitability you need for the future. You're going to pick up on all of that. But for right now, let's just go ahead. We're going to run a standard event and our race finish. Let's go ahead and generate our first race finish. Now, we've already seen what it looks like over here, but look, it's already reset. Remember, every time you update the spreadsheet, these numbers will update. Keep that in mind. So it shows 37. Now I'm going to manually update the spreadsheet by pressing F9. And there we go. So 24th would be our finish, but remember, because of our relative performance, we're at a 49. So I'm going to change that to a 40, as we discussed earlier. So I'm simply going to drop 40 in here, hit enter, and now that drops our race price. Ooh, we didn't make a lot of money there at all. So before we even look into sponsorship, let's go ahead and move our way across. There's our total income. It drops in the number of active teams, expenses, and so forth. Now you notice 0 for marketing, and that's because level 1 marketing, you don't have any expenses. It's just you. You haven't even hired anybody yet. So what do we have? Well, our total expenses are definitely more than our total income. Almost $1,700 in expenses. So for this race, we lost a little over $1,000. So at a minimum, we need that much money just to break even. And then of course we get into chassis damage and so forth, which could make it a lot more than that we need. But we need at least a little over $1,000 to break even. Okay, so now let's figure out our series maximum. All right, where is the series maximum? We're looking at column Q. We come down to the dirt midgets. It is marketing level 6. That's the maximum that we can go. But if we come over to sponsor money, let's see what this relates to. All right, level 6 is going to give us at least an offer, our minimum amount, of $4,800. That would definitely cover our expenses and give us what, about $3,800 left over roughly. Or we could receive up to a maximum sponsorship offer of 19 grand, which of course would have us making very nice money and be well on our way to progressing, expanding our team, moving into a new series, whatever the case may be. In this case, we might want to increase our relative performance with that extra money. But that's at level 6, and we know that can get expensive. So what about level 1? Well, $100 to $500 is our range. $500 isn't going to touch it. So we know level 1 we can't do. Level 2, our maximum amount, before we even consider the amount of money that we're going to have to pay to upgrade our marketing level, is only $1,000. That won't do. Then we get to level 3, $1,900 is the maximum. Assuming we got the maximum offer is only $1,900, then we know that we're going to have expenses come out of that. So let's start to look over into median profit. The median profit gives us an idea. What would happen? What would your per race profitability be on the marketing side only if you got an offer that was right in the middle of the min and the max? In this case, if you got an offer right in the middle and then subtracted the costs that you're going to incur that we see right here in column C for our marketing department, you're going to make about $961. So at the medium level, that's not enough for us. Now, maximum would be great. If we receive the maximum sponsorship offer, we'd make $1,700, subtract the $1,000 that we have in expenses, we make about $700. That would do it, but just barely. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go for marketing level number 4. Here you can see the median profit, it would be about $1,900, and our maximum profit $3,300. So it at least gives us an opportunity to try to break even unless we get into a lot of damage. So let's start out at level 4. So what I'm going to do, and there's a couple of ways that you can do this. You can go straight down to level 4, put in purchase there, and you're off and running. That'll actually save you some money. The way I prefer to do it is consecutively and spend the money for each tier as you go along. Again, you don't have to. If you wanted to, you could jump straight down to whatever level you prefer, hit purchase, and you're good to go. All right, so our maximum level is 6, but we don't quite have enough money. In fact, you can see getting to level 4, we need 10 grand more in order to do that. So I look at that and I say, well, if I accept this, that gets us another 40 grand, but if we got 40 grand, I think we could spend that right here. So now you start to see some of the fun you can have with this. Okay, you can see that throws us back into the negative a little bit there. But the point is, you can see the games that you can play with the money, and then you start deciding, well, how much money do I want? Maybe I need more investors. Maybe do I want to spend money upgrading my marketing level, or would it be better spent upgrading my relative performance? All of these decisions you're going to be faced with on a race-by-race basis. All right, so for our purposes, I'm thinking, well, we're slightly in the negative. What if I got rid of these two and I said, forget it. Let's just get $250,000. That will give us a little bit of pocket money, not quite enough to get to that level 6, not quite, but it gets us to a level 5, which is good. We should make a nice profit per race, and it gives us some room for the future. But again, all of these decisions are up to you. So now we have 99,000 here. I'm going to come back over and we're going to spend a little bit of this 99,000 on some better equipment. We're going to get our relative performance up. So I'm going to say here, equipment, investment. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put purchase. And then how much do we want to purchase? Remember, it's $37.50 for each level of performance. So what if we just did, 10? Okay, that's going to be $37,500. It gets us to minus 15. That's not bad, but I think we got enough for a little bit more. We've got a little bit of extra change, so let's go a minus 10. That's not too bad. Not too bad at all. But again, it's spending a lot of money. We need to come back to the home screen and see, okay, we got 43 grand left. I'm going to leave that right there because I think you guys get the point of where we are. But there's one more thing that we can do before we run our first race, other than getting our first marketing offer. We've got enough for an upgrade, maybe even 2 upgrades for Jade. Now, I'm compressing a lot of things in today's video that I would normally do over the course of a season or 2 in a career, but for the purposes of today's video, I want to get as much into this video as I possibly can. So what I'm going to do is, let's go ahead and purchase. Level 29. It's another 15 grand. If we come back over to the home screen, you can see we're definitely in the red, but we have enough investment for 28 grand more. So I'm going to go ahead and bump her another level. So that means she's now driver level 28. Come back to the home screen. We still have 10 grand left over, which should be enough to cover us in the case of a catastrophic finish where we total a chassis. So I think we're good to go here. Now, you can see we've spent almost $160,000 and we haven't run a race yet. So we have spent quite a bit of money. It's going to take a while to earn that back and even get to break even for this series. But now we're ready to put in our first race. So let's come back over. We now have a level 28 driver in Jade Avedisian. So let's enter our very first race. Okay, so we put this in originally just to get some ideas about the profit or loss. So we're going to take this back out and actually generate a race finish here. Standard event for our very first race. And we are a level 28. It generates a 24th place finish, but because of our relative performance, it's now a 34th place finish. So a little bit better. this time around, put in our 34, hit enter, and there's our race purse, but now we need to get a sponsor. Okay, and you see our sponsor level right here. We upgraded to a team level 5. Again, that comes back to the home screen. And our series can be a maximum of 6 for the Dirt Midgets, but right now we're not quite there, so it shows the same at a level 5. So let's go ahead and I'm going to scroll over a little bit, because as soon as I hit this Generate Sponsors button, you're going to see 4 sponsors pop up. All right, so there we are. And there's one of those wonderful sponsors that you would probably never see in racing, Versace. Gotta love that. I absolutely love it. So we've got Versace, Delta Airlines, Trader Joe's, and Johnson & Johnson. All right, so let's take a look at our amounts and the length of the sponsorship. 83, almost 8,400. Ooh, only $2,000 there. That's no good. 2,300 here. So these immediately are out. Trader Joe's want to give us 6,200 for 9 races, but Versace is where it's at for us. Almost $8,400 for 16 races. That means we're not going to have to worry about a new sponsor for several races. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a copy paste, but again, remember, we're pasting values. So I'll put it right in there, and this spreadsheet will automatically pre-fill everything else moving down as we enter race finishes moving forward. So right now we have a 16 race deal, and that is a great deal for this sponsor level. So now as we move over, total income, $9,100. Total expenses, $2,400. We made a profit in race 1 of almost $6,700, and we didn't even have a great finish. That is how the career mode works. So let's go ahead and do a few more races just so that you can get the idea. We'll run some different types of events just so that you can see how this flows. But in today's video, I've shown you everything that you need to get started. We're going to do race number 2. And race number 2 is going to be a crown jewel. So this is one of the big boys. Now you notice that I'm not putting the track in here, the qualifying position. These are completely up to you. The race finish and the event type are mandatory. You can leave out race numbers, seasons, you can leave out any of that, but you must have the event type and you must have the race finish. If you don't have that, it will throw errors. So keep that in mind. All right, so we've got a crown jewel event. Hopefully we will get a good finish here. All right, so let's scroll over. We're going to go down to 28, and I'm actually going to hit refresh one time to generate a finish of our own, F9. All right, 15th place finish, but again, because of our relative strength, we're at 25. All right, so not terrible. Certainly not what we're looking for long term, but it gets us 25th, a good bit more money because it's a crown jewel event. We have our same sponsor, it's pre-filled that for us. Same thing with the income, it's all pre-filled for us until we get to total expenses, and now look how much money we made. But some of you may have noticed one thing I forgot, and I did this on purpose because it is extremely easy to miss. And the reason I did that is for that very reason. So there's a couple of things that you're going to need to take a look at that are very easy to miss. They're marketing and driver salary. The reason is these are two things that can easily change from race to race. And I say that because, remember, marketing is tied to our marketing level. So what if after race number 1, we had increased our marketing level? Well, it would have changed both of these. And imagine that you're on race 20 down here and you increase your marketing level and it suddenly drops in more cost, but it drops in more cost for all of these. Well, we don't want that. So what I recommend doing, now you can choose to leave it that way if you want to just roll the dice with it, but what I recommend is simply coming into the total marketing race after race and doing a copy paste like we have been. What that's going to do by pasting the value is instead of that now being a formula as it was, it's now a hard number. And that hard number will not change in the future should you upgrade your marketing level. Okay, so that is another tip that I highly recommend, because if you start upgrading your marketing level deep into a series after you've run a lot of races, the increase in cost can be huge. And remember that our sponsorship didn't change, so we're not going to get any more money. We're just dumping a lot more cost in there. So again, I highly recommend doing that. So that's actually why I have these in the cells above. Where you see these, that's to remind you to copy paste. So we've already copy pasted our marketing. We need to do driver salary. Well, it just so happens there's an amount right here. And that amount is the total of all of our drivers, which right now we only have one driver, but it is the total salary. So what we would want to do race after race is we would simply want to, again, paste that value in for each event. I know it's a bit more work, but there was really no good way that I could find to get around it that actually kept the numbers accurate. So again, takes a little bit more work, but that's why you see these up here, whereas in the other areas, they're not written above those. That's because you don't need to worry about that. They will be pre-filled for you, with the exception of the chassis damage. And so far, we've actually had some decent finishes given the level of our driver. They're not really out of the question for a driver of that level. So that is how the career mode functions. We've talked about pretty much everything on the spreadsheet. Now, one other thing I want to cover as we bring our video to a close is, all right, so what do you do once this runs out? You know, the next race, it'll be 14 races remaining, 13, 12, and so on. What happens when it runs out and it reaches 0? Well, you're going to need to hit generate sponsors again and do the exact same process. The next open line, you'll simply copy paste the same way we did, and it will continue on the same as we saw in race number 2. So now that we're up and running, let's actually see how much money we have on the home screen. We've run a couple of races. We're back up to almost 27 grand in our account. Now, remember, our profit and loss for this particular series is still well into the negative, but our team balance, because of our investors, is at 27 grand. So what I would recommend doing at this point is actually improving your relative performance. Do another purchase right here and spend a little money to try to get back ever closer to that 0 level. Now, the final thing I want to cover today is, what do you do about relative performance other than the very beginning? Well, what I like to do is use it throughout the season. So obviously teams are doing research and development. They're getting new parts and pieces throughout the year. They're improving things, their setups, their engines, and so forth. So this is a continuous process. So you need to make a decision, number one, whether or not you want to use this section at all. And then if you do, how often? I like to use it at least twice during the season. If I'm running, say, for example, a 30 race season, I might use it every 10 races. So after 10 races, it's time for another relative performance update on the loss side. Okay? And the way I do that is I will come in and I will say, okay, time for, let's say this one is a mid-season adjustment. All right, so we've run, let's say we've run, 10 races. It's time for another adjustment. What I like to do is use the performance loss right here. This is a randomized number from 1 to 15, and it tells how much performance we have lost. So in this case, it's 11. That's a lot. So all of the hard work we just put in, all the money we just invested is now gone again. And by the way, you notice every time the spreadsheet updates, the performance loss updates. So now we spent 56 grand updating our performance, but now after about 10 races, we've done another adjustment and we've lost 11 positions. So now we're back to a negative 21. Now we're going to have to spend more money in order to try to just get back to where we were. And the reason I really love this system is because, number one, there's some randomness to it. You could choose your own number to put here. Maybe you want to put 1, 5, 10, 20, whatever you want to put, you could do. I like the randomness of never knowing exactly how much performance loss we're going to have each time I run a performance loss. Again, you can do this once a year. You can do it every 10 races. You can do it twice a year, however often you want to do it. But again, I usually like to do it in a 30 race season about twice during the year, about every 10 races. So it adds a lot of fun because you never know exactly how much money you're going to have to spend to get back to the level of performance that you want. So now imagine that you have the top level driver. You have a level 26 driver, a championship competitor. And in this case, he would have finished second had we had top of the line equipment. He would have had an amazing race. But because we're falling behind on our equipment, he finished 23rd. So that is no good. And this area, the relative performance upgrades, gives you an amazing way to really add some difficulty to the experience. So with that in mind, once again, be sure to ask any questions that you have. Head over to the Knee-Pit Gaming Discord. There will be a certain channel available for you to ask questions, and I definitely recommend that you do so if your questions are not answered using the notes that I have put here in the spreadsheet. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and stick around for more here at Knee-Pit Gaming.